Now, without further ado, let me introduce our first keynote speaker. Dr. Wong Meng Ee is a tenured associate professor at the Psychology and Child and Human Development Academic Group at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technology University. Meng Ee researches and teaches in areas of special and inclusive education, assistive technology, disability studies, and teacher education across diploma and postgraduate courses. He has co-edited books with Levin Lim, the title Special Needs in Singapore, Trends and Issues. This book was recently published in August 2021 by World Scientific and addresses special needs and disability in Singapore. Today, Associate Professor Wong will be speaking on improving SEN students' engagement in the classroom, considering assistive technology through SETT Framework. We'd now like to welcome Dr. Wong, please.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation and to be here to share with all of you today. It's a pleasure to be here under quite unusual circumstances that we have now moved onto presentations onto the Zoom platform. I should say right up from the start that I'm visually impaired and I'm blind. However, I'm able to use and present and connect with you today because of technology. I am a keen assistive technology user. Without the technology, I'm not able to access very common pieces of technology that we have come to use and expect in a day-to-day. For example, PowerPoint slides. But in any case, let me show you a quick video. I think the team will be helping me to screen that. I'll take a step back, let you watch the video and come back to you again just to reinforce the point. So can we show the video, please?
We are pushing the boundaries of what is possible through technology. Without it, I would not be able to speak to you today.
He was down to about a word a minute.
Every time he needed to access his machine, open files, surf the web, all of these actions were very, very tedious because he had to rely on a mouse, which was really very hard for someone who doesn't have an ability to move a mouse. We wanted to build a more open platform that allowed us to really quickly configure and change things so that we're constantly iterating and trying. Bring in different word predictors, bring in different sensors, change the UI, do all of these things by way of just maybe changing XML files rather than doing a lot of coding.
The system is written using Visual Studio, C#. We use standard Windows forms, .NET 4.5. We also use some WPF. And we use the standard Microsoft pluggable framework paradigm to load all the DLLs at runtime. Everything was built around this one actuation mechanism where he uses his cheek to trigger the system. The system responds.
And we collected hours and hours of footage of just his face, of him interacting with the system. What was the range of his motion? Did it change with the time of the day? When he was tired, you want the system to trigger. You want the software interface to work.
We iterated a lot with him being as a key designer. And the minute he started using it, he would find something. And then he'll come back to us and he'll have this huge smile on his face. His access to many of the common functions in his machine was about a 10x improvement. Stephen was actually quite adamant about open sourcing the system. The nice thing about having such an open platform is that really people from different areas of research and development can really make a huge impact. So please help us. We can't wait to see what your contributions will bring to the world of disabilities.
I challenge you all here to excel, to bring about the changes you want in the world. Keep pushing and never give up. Welcome to Connect.
So I wonder what takeaways you had from the video, the quick video from Stephen Hawking. I think it's remarkable that technology has helped someone like Stephen Hawking also be able to access information, access and communicate with the world in a way that he would otherwise not have the ability to do so. We often think of Stephen Hawking as the world-famous cosmologist, the researcher, scientist, who is very prominent and holds many awards in researching into black holes. But I think we don't really think of him so much as a person with disability, do we? Because his abilities to research and his findings have, I think, stood much more strongly and more prominently than his disability. But in any case, I think the technology features very prominently in his abilities, and it has helped him in many ways of coping and living life. In a similar way, as you can see from the slide on the screen, the IBM Training Manual talks about technology being a convenience for most people in society, and that helps makes life easier for all of us. But for someone with a disability, the technology, in fact, has an even more powerful impact in the sense that it not only makes life convenient for them, but it makes life possible. It makes access to information, access to mainstream, access to many parts of life, which, again, without the technologies, it would be inaccessible and be a barrier to entry. So with the technologies, it has become a key game changer for many of these individuals. So what is assistive technology? So we take the, typically we normally take the definition from the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is a federal law in the US, and they have come up with a, I think, very complete. They come up with a very complete definition from the from their definition of what assistive technology is. So as we can see, assistive technology device refers to any item, piece, or equipment, product, system, whether acquired commercially off the shelf, modified or customized, that is used to increase or maintain, improve the functionality, functional capabilities of persons with disabilities. Well, in this case, a child, but the definition changes a little bit depending on the federal law that refers to it. But in any case, I think you begin to see now that the definition is very broad and encapsulates quite a diverse range of technologies and equipment. So I think a couple of key things to just bear in mind. You know, is it something that is bought? Is it something that is created, maybe in a very simple, makeshift way, in other words? And this enables persons with disabilities to be able to compensate for their disabilities. So given the broad and diverse nature of what assistive technology is, here's 7 possible categories that we can categorize disability assistive technology under. Firstly, it could be issues with positioning. Secondly, mobility issues, augmentative alternative communication, AAC, computer access, adaptive toys and games, adaptive environments, instructional aids. So what this helps us to understand is the range of technologies that can be helpful. And notice that we have, well, especially for Brian and Brian who have come up with this list, we have moved away from what would traditionally be technologies for the visually impaired, technologies for deaf or hard of hearing, technologies for people with motor disabilities, learning disabilities, and so on. So I think it's a step in the direction to look less at the person's disability and more towards the focus on what the technology can present and can help in terms of supporting persons with different kinds of disabilities or special needs. So I'll just quickly go through these in turn. So in terms of positioning, someone who may need additional support, for example, in adapting to different environments, they may be slipping off a chair, and they may need additional support. They may need better ergonomic kind of seats for better posturing, and they may need, perhaps even a footstool, right, to give them some stability. So I think if we look at this broadly, there are many possibilities in terms of helping someone to position themselves comfortably in order for learning to take place. Second aspect is mobility. Again, a very broad umbrella of possible technologies. And largely, the items that we want to think about here would be, I think the wheelchair would be a very obvious one. Getting someone who has motor disabilities to help them move from point to point. Crutches could be another one too. Okay, and perhaps even in today's context where technology has improved, and there are increasing different types of technologies that may help someone with a visual impairment in moving around and helping them with their mobility needs. Next one is Augmentative Alternative Communication, AAC. Usually these technologies range from simple cards where you have indications of certain expressions. For example, as simple as yes, no, I want to, or I would like to, I need, and so forth. And these basic cards can actually help persons who have difficulties in speech to be able to communicate, right, in a case where they would otherwise not be able to do so. It also has now moved into very advanced versions of not only cards, but you can find such, I think, applications on our smart devices today. Certain technologies also are able to help express the needs and wants of persons who may not be able to speak or express themselves verbally. Computer access. So just as all of us use computers today, right? It's almost our extension of our right and left hands. But what happens if someone is unable to connect using the information, interfacing with the technology, right? If someone has, for example, difficulties in typing, someone who has difficulties in seeing, might they be able to type the information and interface? Many of us continue to make the assumption that the general interfacing of information into a computer is by the keyboard. But what if the keyboard is inaccessible, is unfriendly, right? It doesn't allow for some members of our population to be able to access the computer. So what alternative ways can we do that? Can we do it by a modified keyboard? Can we do it by speech, dictation? Are there other ways? And maybe even as what we saw in the video with Stephen Hawking, the way he communicates with his computer apparently is by using his cheek muscles. Isn't that fantastic, right? Using your cheek muscles to control the movement and to select alphabets and so forth. So that's a remarkable way, certainly unconventional to what you and I would typically expect in terms of interfacing with technology. Adaptive toys and games. Well, we often think of assistive technology just in terms of technology, but what about toys and games? We have children with different types of disabilities, and they too also need to have opportunities to develop opportunities to play, to learn through play, And not only that, but to play and to be able to play using toys that may be able to connect with the larger peer population that they will have, right? Whether it's classmates or even siblings. If their siblings and classmates do not have a disability, what are the opportunities are we creating for them so that they can play collectively? So this is an important part of assistive technology as well. Adaptive environments. I think the most common one that I can share with you as a possibility is, for example, having Google Home, Google Assist, where you might even just announce to the device to turn on and off your light switches, turn on and off air conditioning, maybe open and close the blinds, turn on and off the fans. Again, it's a convenience for us today just to walk into a room and make that announcement and have something follow through. But for someone, again, who may have limitations in mobility, or they are on a wheelchair and they cannot reach the light switches or the switches of devices that are typically at standing level, such ability to control the environment is, again, a remarkable access for individuals with different types of disabilities. Instructional aids is another category again. So calculators, or maybe talking calculators. What I'm using now is screen technology that reads the content to me as I listen to my content, that allows me to know that I'm on whichever slide and corresponds to be able to correspond my delivery of my presentation to you in a way that is in sequence with what you are also seeing on the screen. Okay, so many times again of possible instructional devices that can help different types of persons with disabilities. So what does it all mean, right? I think you don't have to worry too much about the types of the technologies. I think that will come quite naturally, as you would if you are in the position to have to think about the different technologies to work with the individuals. These things will come quite naturally in having to think about it. But I want to just share with you this simple a diagram that helps us to think of it at two levels. One, the sophistication of the sophistication of the technology that we will be thinking about in supporting the student, and secondly, the complexity of the task that is going to be done. So, in other words, do we choose something? What do we choose? How do we go about choosing? Do we have to always use a very high-tech device to match a task that is high-tech, or what do we? How do we balance that out, right? Do we always need to use a high-tech device, or can we use a low-tech device to meet the needs of a complex task? So essentially, we think of technologies in three broad categories, if we want to say. The low-tech devices tend to be simple, easy to use, doesn't require too much training, not electronic at all. So I would say, very simple things, pencil grips, rubber bands, clips. These are simple devices, but I think also can also serve as different types of assistive technology to help different simple, but different needs. Secondly, we can also think of it in mid-tech, right? Medium or mid-tech devices. They are neither low-tech nor are they high-tech. But certainly, it still could be helpful for helping students with different needs, help in achieving some of their needs in a classroom. But what about high-tech devices, right? Something that is kind of highly high-tech driven. quite sophisticated in its and how it's presented. But the issue here is it may also mean that it is expensive. So if I just get us to cast our minds back again at the AT continuum diagram, in the sense that the sophistication of the AT device versus the complexity of the task, how do we make a bit of a judgment, right? Do we always need a high-tech device to serve and to meet the high-tech, to serve complex tasks? Or can we use a low-tech or mid-tech device to maybe serve or address a medium or low, medium or high complexity task that needs to be achieved, right? So there's something to be helpful for us to think about. Implications, of course, there are a couple. Let me just give you two implications. One is the need for training. If we choose a high-tech device, clearly we will need time for training and getting to know how to use the device. Secondly, I think there's also a huge cost factor to consider. Maybe high-tech devices are by default, being high-tech, it's more expensive, right? And being low-tech, it's not expensive. So these are a couple of quick considerations to bring to the fore when we make some considerations. So I just want to come back to the IDEA, when just as they had a definition of what assistive technology is, I think they were very forward-looking in considering that they were very forward-looking in not only providing us with a definition of AT, which I've shared earlier, but they also talk about service, right? So it's a dual relationship. Just as they gave us a definition of what AT is, they also stated very clearly that there needs to be a set of services to support the delivery of the AT. So this is quite a wide spectrum of considerations, but given the time constraints, I'm only going to just highlight the importance of the service in terms of consideration, and how do we put that into motion. So I want to quickly share with you the SETT framework, SETT. SETT stands for Student, Environment, Tasks, and Tools. So in thinking about how to implement or how to think about an appropriate technology, assistive technology for your student, I think the SETT framework comes out as an excellent framework to quickly get us to think about it in a very simple. Well, you have the acronym there, which thinks about it in a 4-step process, SETT. So essentially, what is the SETT framework? So firstly, I think it seeks to promote collaborative relationships amongst people in the school, whether you are deciding for the technology. But I think it's very key that we want to maybe make that decision collectively, not just one person. And if we want to consult a group of people, given that after all, in a school, the student is not only taught by one teacher, but the student functions in I suppose, in an ecosystem of activities and staff that takes place there. It's also student-centered, that it considers the needs for the student. And hopefully it's the considerations it also looks at is takes into consideration the environment. The task also that we want to think about should be task focused so that the technologies are relevant. Okay, so I will just move on. It's actually a series of questions that we want to look at in the SETT framework, so quite flexible in that nature, that it seeks to get those of us who are thinking about the AT application or implementation through a series of questioning. So firstly, the student. So in thinking about the AT, what we want to think about, well, firstly, the functionality of the student. right? What are the strengths of this person? What may be the challenges he or she may be experiencing? What do they need in order for them to be able to complete the tasks that they need to do? Okay. So we are looking at the student quite holistically, and how we can consider and put, and in asking some of these questions, hopefully we can come closer to a more complete sense of what is necessary for the student. Looking at this a bit more about the student, we want the team to come together, have a really open discussion, have non-judgmental sharing, and piecing together, painting this picture of the student, and hopefully coming to a bit more of a holistic perspective of what the student is and what his or her needs are. So hopefully also in understanding the strengths, we can leverage on the person's strengths in order for them to be able to tap on those strengths moving forward. Looking at the environment next. What are the materials does this person need in the environment that they're in? Are they in the classroom? What are the physical arrangements? And I think in this case, Zobala is the person who had developed SETT. Her intention of environment actually is a very broad definition, not just the room, the classroom, the school, but I think it also encompasses the people around that makes up the whole environment, meaning to say the teachers, the support staff, maybe even the peers who may be within the school system. All right. So we typically, as what is said here, we typically only take a cursory glance, don't we, over in a school, in a classroom. But let's take a much broader perspective of what the environment entails. So seeking to find details, okay, within the environment. The environment, of course, is not only the school, right? But it's not only the classroom, but maybe the canteen, the student, and especially, I suppose, many of you are from secondary schools. Secondary schools probably have a lot more movement in the school, right? They go from, they move from one class to another, or see different teachers for different subjects as well. So layout of the classroom. Are there available sockets in the classroom? What is the shelving like within the class, right? Are there cupboards? Maybe might technologies be kept within the school after school hours and so forth, right? The kind of lighting around the school, what sort of, are there windows? Are there no windows? So these are the kind of general things we want to be mindful of as well. Also, I mentioned here about students not being only in the classroom, but clearly they go home, they are at home. So maybe does the technology have any impact at home as well? Okay, canteen, playground. Essentially, the student is not static, right? They don't just stay in one place, they move about. And in moving about, maybe there are different environmental considerations, different needs that come into play. Next is the task. What is the student supposed to do? All right, having identified the environment, in every environment, there are certain tasks that every student would need to do. In an English class, for example, students' main task is reading, writing, and so forth. In a PE class, perhaps they have other kind of specific requirements. Is it a track class? Do they need how to throw, catch, or is it a swimming class where they need to be able to swim and be able to execute certain strokes? Do they even know how to do that? So what are some of the key things that we want to look at, and what do they need to achieve to be able to complete these tasks? Okay. So ultimately, the tasks really are the I suppose the step-by-step process by which we hope, we seek to have the students to be able to achieve those tasks and to be able to eventually complete their necessary learning as spelled out in the curriculum. Finally, the tools. Okay, what might they take? How might the technology, after considering the SET, the final T here, really looks at the what may be the technology that could best suit the needs of the student. So again, where environment is defined quite broadly, not only in terms of the structure, but also the persons involved there. I think the tools here also looks quite broadly in terms of devices, services, etc. Who's around? Who's going to be around to help support the student? Okay, so I mentioned earlier on about the low, medium, and high-tech technologies and the AT continuum. I think that would nicely fit into kind of a consideration process as we look through the different kinds of tools. Finally, the implementation process. How do we go about implementing the technologies? So once we've gathered all the information that we have, the recommendation really is to piece together how we make a plan for the student, thinking about how to acquire the technology. Does training need to be considered? Do we trial the technology even beforehand, before making a final decision? What are the human resources that's in the school that can help support the student, and so forth? Okay, so developing a timeline is important. I think as we are quite outcome driven, right? Many of us in schools, we also want to try and look at an implementation, charting an implementation direction and journey for the person. Okay, so in a very quick whirlwind introduction to you, this is really I believe a helpful way to frame our minds, right, in terms of how, in the situation where we might consider assistive technology for our students. I think the SETT framework is a very quick acronym, SETT, that you can really pull out just by having the 4 alphabets roll off your tongue, and you can very quickly think about the issues that needs to be considered for supporting the students. From my research, I have had, it's not uncommon, right, for teachers to be just catching one another within the staff room and asking what may be some technologies that are helpful for you, and then another teacher would follow on with that. That typically is quite a norm, and whilst there's nothing wrong with that, I think the SETT framework helps us to, I think, concretize and puts into a sequence, and hopefully maybe with some documentation. It also helps to secure and help us to see the rationale in terms of how we will go through AT. Okay, I'm sorry I took a little longer than what I expected, and partially I think my technology today is not behaving itself, which is why we had a little bit of hiccups in the start. So I apologize for my screen reader not behaving itself, but hopefully it doesn't stop us from learning from today's examples. So hopefully that has been helpful for you, and I look forward to listening to the 2 other keynote speakers, and later on having a bit of a discussion towards the end. Thanks so much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Meng Ee. Really is a very insightful talk that you have given, and really let us see some of the very important directions that must be moved in order to improve on the special education needs students' engagement in the classroom. And I really think that the SETT framework is very useful to that direction. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the next speaker, Ms. Saranajit Kaur.